Hello and welcome back to the Fantasy Playmakers. What's up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be doing another mock draft, and this is going to be a 10-team league, PPR scoring, and we're going to be drafting from the 10th overall position. And then it's going to be pretty standard roster setup. 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, a flex, defense, kicker, and then 6 bench slots. Let me know down below in the comments if you guys want me to do a specific kind of mock setup. So different scoring settings, the certain amount of teams, maybe different roster positions. Let me know down below and I'll try to get to as many as I can. And then if you enjoyed the video, please just leave a like and subscribe down below. I would really appreciate it. But let's get started. So this is the first 9 picks of the draft, and the first round was dominated almost entirely by running backs. We saw 8 RBs come off the board. Devontae Adams was the only non-running back picked, and he went at the 4th overall selection. So the running backs were McCaffrey, Cook, Henry, Kamara, Elliott, Saquon, Jonathan Taylor, and then Aaron Jones. So it's our pick here at the 110, and we're definitely going to have a lot of different options. I think we got to get at least 1 running back for sure. And there's a top option for me here. It's got to be Austin Eckler, especially in PPR scoring. I mean, his ceiling is just so crazy. He's such a great receiving back. And I'm really high on this entire Chargers offense this year. So I think starting off with Austin Eckler is a really solid RB1 pick. But I think the interesting part here, since we're at the turn, what are we going to do with our second pick? We could go with another running back. We could definitely go wide receiver. We still have Tyreek Hill on the board, but I'm actually thinking about going with Travis Kelsey here. I'm definitely lower on Travis Kelsey than I think consensus is. In Underdog Fantasy Football, he's being drafted as like the 6th or 7th player off the board. I definitely think that's too early, but in 8 or 10 team leagues, I do feel more comfortable picking tight end early because you're going to be able to get a decent amount of depth at the other positions. So I think, in my overall rankings, I do believe I have Tyreek Hill and probably Nick Chubb ranked higher than Travis Kelsey. But let's just kind of see how this turns out. Is drafting Travis Kelsey, as a early second round pick, is this something that ends up creating a really good team? So that's what we're going to try out today. So the second round is pretty split between running backs and wide receivers. Looks like 3 running backs went off, 5 wide receivers, and then Patrick Mahomes was thrown in there in the second round. Way too early, but I do think you could definitely see it in your guys' drafts. And then third round, basically almost the same split. We had 3 running backs, 5 wide receivers, Darren Waller thrown in there, and that leads us into our pick here at the 310. So once again, we're going to have back-to-back picks, and I think this makes this selection a little bit interesting just because there is going to be so much time in between our pick, and the next time we're up on the board. And so the question is, do we need to get 2 workhorse running backs here? I'm definitely not looking quarterback, definitely not looking tight end. Even though George Kittle here is a good value, obviously we have Travis Kelsey, so we definitely will not be drafting a tight end for the rest of the draft. But when I'm looking at the running backs available, we have Deandre Swift and Chris Carson. These are definitely my 2 favorite guys who are still on the board. I do think I like Chris Carson just a little bit more, but actually DeAndre Swift would be tempting here because it is PPR and he is such a great receiving back. But there are also some really solid options at wide receiver here. And if we went running back, then we would have a long wait before our next wide receiver. And I think our wide receiver room would just be super thin. So I think we may go 1 and 1 here, 1 running back, 1 wide receiver. And so let's go with the running back first because I do want to get those, 2 solid guys locked in. I think I am going to lean here with Swift. I think it's definitely more of the riskier pick just because we don't really know what this Lions offense is going to look like, but they just have so few weapons that I think DeAndre Swift just has to be involved, and he's just so talented as a player. I can't really see him being a major bust this year, and then I also mentioned his great role in the receiving game. So that's where I'm going to go at the running back position. But, I really couldn't fault you if you went with Chris Carson at this slot. And now we're looking at wide receivers. And I do think, there are some top guys here, Robinson, Robert Woods, Amari Cooper, Mike Evans. But I do think A-Rob is pretty clearly my favorite guy that's available. He's just so consistent, year to year and week to week. It doesn't matter who's playing quarterback. Allen Robinson is going to produce. I think he's probably one of the safest wide receivers that you're going to get in this range. So I feel solid having him as my wide receiver 1. I think it's really great to have a safe guy kind of anchoring that position. So the 4th and 5th rounds kind of follow the typical patterns that you guys see in mocks. A ton of wide receivers went off the board in both of these rounds. There were 3 running backs thrown in there, another quarterback with Josh Allen, and then Kittle went in the early 4th, and Kyle Pitts went in the mid 5th. So now we're going to be making our 5th round selection, and I think we got very lucky here because with our 3rd round pick, we were choosing between Deandre Swift and Chris Carson, and Chris Carson is somehow still on the board here. He is so wildly underrated. I'm going to have so many shares of him this year, but he definitely has to be one of these 2 picks that we have. He's going to slot right into the flex, and that gives us 3 really solid running backs that I feel confident in starting on a week-to-week basis. And then we have our 2nd pick here at the turn, and we could go running back. There are some solid options here. Darrell Henderson, Mike Davis. I like both of those guys, but I think the smartest move would definitely be going wide receiver. We currently only have A-Rob, and so we do need to fill in one spot in our starting lineup. And looking at the players available, I think the 2 guys I'd be choosing between would probably be T. Higgins and Kenny Golladay. And I do think I'm going to lean a little bit more towards Higgins just because we've seen him kind of succeed as the number 1 wide receiver in this offense. Kenny Golladay is moving to this Giants team, and we really just don't know what to expect out of him. So I'm just going to kind of buy into what I've already seen. I do think T. Higgins is going to be the number 1 over Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase has been struggling. I still think he's going to be a great NFL wide receiver, but I just don't know if he's going to have that top tier production this year. And if he doesn't, then I think T. Higgins most definitely will. In the 6th and 7th rounds, we saw kind of a run on quarterback happen. So Kyler and Lamar went in the 6th. Dak Prescott actually went at the end of the 6th as well. And then the 7th round, we saw 4 quarterbacks come off the board with Russ, Brady, Herbert, and Aaron Rodgers. So every other team has a quarterback except for us. And that leaves us in what I think is a very good position because that means we can wait, maybe 2, 3, 4 more rounds and not pick our quarterback because we just have to get a guy before another team goes for their backup. So I think that's going to open up a lot of value at every other position because I think some of these teams panic, right? There's no way that guys like Brady and Herbert, even though I'm very high on both those guys this season, should be going within half a round of Lamar Jackson. I just don't think it should happen. And so let's see if there's some value on the board that we can capitalize on here. I think we've got to go with one of these running backs that is still on the board, and I'm definitely going to be leaning towards Darrell Henderson. I could be talked into Myles Gaskin potentially, but it just seems like we don't really know what's up with that backfield. It's a little cloudier than I was, hoping and expecting. But for Henderson, it looks like he is going to be the workhorse. He may not get the same amount of work that Cam Akers was going to get, but they haven't gone out and brought in competition for him. So that tells me that they feel comfortable giving him a major workload, and I think that's going to lead to a ton of fantasy production. And you're just getting him like 5 rounds later than you'd be able to draft Cam Akers. So as my RB4, I just think that's crazy. Then we probably want to go wide receiver with this 2nd pick at the turn because we do only have 2 wide receivers. We've got 4 running backs and then obviously a locked in tight end. And like I mentioned, I think we can definitely wait at the quarterback position. But looking at the wide receivers, we've got Tyler Boyd, Jerry Jeudy, Brandon Cooks, Debo, all these guys. We could go for that Bengals stack with Boyd and Higgins, but I don't think I'm a huge fan of that. I think the best guy available here is Brandon Cooks. I've been taking him in a ton of drafts. He's going to be the wide receiver 1 for the Texans. And even though their offense is going to be bad, he may not have a ton of touchdown upside. I think he can still secure a decent amount of volume. And he is just so clearly the best option there that I think he'll still be able to produce, especially in a PPR format. So after we picked Brandon Cooks, the 8th round was pretty split between wide receivers and running backs. A few more wide receivers went off the board. And then 9th round, basically evenly split as well. So that leads us into our 9th round pick. I think the big question here is, do we draft our quarterback at this slot, or do we think we could wait, until our 11th round pick? Could be a little bit risky, but I think we'll just have to see what's on the board. If there's some crazy value at other positions, then I'd feel more comfortable waiting. If there's not, then I'll probably just go out and secure our quarterback. What is a little bit shocking is that TJ Hawkinson is still on the board. We do have Travis Kelsey, so I don't know if we're going to pull the trigger on that. I think we just let some other team kind of take advantage of that. Looking at the running back position, Damian Harris, Melvin Gordon. We could go with one of these guys, but we already have 4 players that I feel comfortable starting right now. So I think we could honestly kind of punt that position for a while. Looking at the wide receivers, Corey Davis, Curtis Samuel, Michael Gallup, Mike Williams. I think I may take a shot here on a guy that I think has a very high ceiling, and that is going to be Curtis Samuel. If he can put it all together, he gets to work in the receiving game. He gets some work on the ground as well. We saw with Ron Rivera, he had a ton of air yards with the Panthers. And then when Matt Rule came in, they used him more as a short guy, but also getting a lot of rushing attempts. So I think if you can combine all of that together, he could definitely be a very solid number 2 to Terry McLaurin. And so we're kind of taking a little bit of a risk here. Not a super safe pick, but if it works out, I think it'll be great value. Then with our second pick at this turn, there's not really anyone else who's truly sticking out as someone I really want to draft. So I think we may just have to play it safe here and snag my top quarterback who is still available, and that would be Ryan Tannehill. He is just so consistent at the QB position. He's got solid weapons again this year with A.J. Brown and now bringing in Julio Jones. So I'm expecting another solid QB1 season this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's like a mid to maybe potentially even higher end quarterback with all that touchdown upside on this offense. So finally, TJ Hawkinson did come off the board here in the 10th round. I really don't think you're ever going to see him fall that far in drafts, maybe some sort of glitch in this system. But another round kind of mixed between running backs and wide receivers. In the 11th, we saw Ronald Jones, Kenyon Drake, and Zach Moss come off the board. Wide receivers Marvin Jones and Henry Ruggs. Then we also saw the first defenses being picked, the Rams and the Steelers. So we are up now with our 11th round pick. We have our entire starting lineup filled out in terms of position players. Obviously, we still need a defense and a kicker. And then we have 3 bench slots left. I think I'm going to go out and get our 5th running back with this first pick, and that is probably going to be James Conner. I really like him this year. I think he has a chance to step into that Kenyon Drake role. It's definitely not going to be guaranteed, but I don't know if the Cardinals fully trust Chase Edmonds to be the workhorse, and I think in a high-scoring offense, he could definitely have some value. And so to get him as an RB5, I feel really good about that. Then with our next pick here, we could go out and get a wide receiver, but I think I'm going to go out and get a quarterback and then snag one of these later round wide receivers with our last, open spot for a position player. So I'm choosing between Jalen Hurts and Matthew Stafford. I think I'm going to go with Jalen Hurts because he has that higher ceiling. I think Tannehill is a very safe week-to-week play, but Jalen Hurts has legitimate upside to potentially be the QB1. I do see that in the cards just because of that rushing upside, but in the same way, he could totally bust and, may not even end the season as a starter. So there's such a wide range of outcomes, but getting him this late, I think it's definitely worth taking on that risk. So the 12th round is where a lot of teams went out and either got their second tight end or took their first tight end, as a late round option. And then the 13th round was just filled with running backs. 8 of the 9 picks were RBs, with Matthew Stafford thrown in there in the 13th round. So we are up here with our 13th pick. We're going to be getting our last bench slot, and I'm going to be hoping that my guy Marquez Callaway is still available. I talked about him yesterday as a must-draft wide receiver, and then I'm watching this preseason game right now, and the man is absolutely balling out. 2 first-quarter touchdowns, 2 amazing catches, so I'm going to be buying in on him for sure. If he's going to be the wide receiver 1 of this Saints team, that's going to carry so much value, especially with how late he is going. So take advantage of that right now because his ADP is probably about to skyrocket. Now we have the second pick of the turn here, and so we're just going to be going out and getting our kicker. I stream defenses, so I'm always going to be drafting the kicker before the defense. So let's just go out and get the number 1 guy, Justin Tucker, to plug into our lineup. Just a nice consistent guy every single year. He's going to be on this Ravens offense, which is going to score a lot of points. So he's going to be the guy there. And then we're going to have one more pick here, which is going to be a defense. As expected, the 14th and 15th rounds were just filled with kickers and defenses. So we have the very last pick of the draft here. So we're just going to go out and get whatever is the best remaining defense. Looks like it's the Patriots. I'm just going to go with the Bills here. They're ranked 1 after. I think I've picked the Patriots in basically every single mock draft I've done. It's kind of just the way it is played out. So let's just diversify the defense and go with the Bills. That is going to finish up the final round of this draft. We had the very last pick. So let's take a look at what our roster looks like. Remember, don't pay attention to the grade. It just grades you on how well you follow their ADP. So let's go through our starting lineup. Ryan Tannehill, Austin Eckler, DeAndre Swift, Allen Robinson, T. Higgins, Travis Kelsey, Chris Carson, Bills defense, and Justin Tucker. Position by position, I think our quarterback room is very strong. We have a solid QB1 in Ryan Tannehill, and then a very high upside play with Jalen Hurts. Running backs, probably the strong point of this team. Eckler, Swift, Carson, all great starts. And then we have Darrell Henderson, who is also a solid guy to plug into your lineup as our RB4. Then James Conner as the RB5. Receivers, a little weak, but I think still solid. A-Rob, T. Higgins, Brandon Cooks, Curtis Samuel, and Marquez Callaway, who seems like he's going to be a crazy value with this last pick. If we just look at how he's playing now, Mike Thomas out. We don't know how that relationship is, so he could have a very high ceiling this season. And then our best overall player at their position, Travis Kelsey, the clear tight end one, a crazy positional advantage. So I really like how this roster came out. Picking Travis Kelsey early was a little bit of a risk, but I do think we got some great value in the later rounds. Chris Carson falling to us where he did was super solid. Also, Darrell Henderson going where he did helped us out a lot. So, some things kind of had to come together, but they did, and it ended up being a great roster. So if you guys enjoyed the video, you stuck around all the way to the end, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate your guys' support, and I'm going to continue doing these mock drafts every single day. So thank you guys for stopping by, and I'll see you tomorrow.